There was recently a publication that was like, we've started to figure out why salmon populations are dying, and it has to do with the fact that the runoff from roads contains the rubber from car tires. And back in the 60s, we started making softer tires because they're safer. And now the reproduction of the salmon is disrupted because of these chemicals in the waterways that are just constantly, sort of
Right.
washing away. And I I worry that there is a massive focus on carbon dioxide,
Mhm.
like
Well, it's
Shiloh
interesting.
was saying.
You can almost like especially some of these large actors, like especially the military, the huge corporations, the chemical companies, they can almost like buy indulgences for carbon waste, right? Because they can pay a carbon tax or they can maybe make scrubbers to deal with it, but there's very little attention being put onto these other, perhaps more immediate problems with.
Because they require restructuring of the way that we do things, right? Like we talk about these plastics that are single use, and there's conversation about how to shift away from those. But is there a significant conversation about how to shift away from car tires and PFAS and
Like
everything
heavy
else?
metal leakage and yeah, I wish I could.
Right. I
I'm trying to
mean,
find a list of
so
toxins right
yeah.
now, but there's
No,
quite a few of them, right?
yeah. No, no. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, the US, we have the EPA, which is tasked to look at all of those different things. I mean, my focus is mainly on the impacts on climate, and so yes, I'm worried about carbon dioxide and the other greenhouse gases, and I think that they do deserve more of our time than perhaps some of those other ones that you mentioned. Not because they don't have important effects, but because what we're doing with the climate is cumulative. And while we might say, okay, well, we can tidy up the air pollution in the cities, and that actually can happen quite quickly, as we saw with the pandemic and the different restrictions there caused a massive reduction in urban smog everywhere where there was a big lockdown. Um, but the impacts of carbon dioxide, they're geological in scale. They're not local. They're not short term. And as we started this conversation, we were talking about the geological consequences of our activities, and then presumably potentially other civilizations as well. And that seems to me to be a different class of problem. The other kinds of wastes that we're distributing, we try and things that we thought were good ideas 100 years ago. A lot of those we're not doing anymore. So now we have new bad ideas that hopefully in less than 100 years we will not be doing anymore. And a lot of times those things will be rectified in some sense. I mean, we had lead in petrol because it was efficient for engines, and now we don't. Right, and so that's a massive boon for public health compared to the situation in the 1950s and 1960s. Can we find new ways of building tires that don't shed, particular kinds of chemicals into salmon runoff? I imagine that people are working on that. I don't know specifically, but they're the kinds of things where, as technology evolves, we will hopefully get better and make less of a mark on our environment. That's not a guarantee, but it is something that I think that we can work toward.